The skies darkened across Earth that fateful Monday morning. It wasn't clouds that blocked the sun, but the massive warships of the Vuldari Dominion. These giant vessels, each bigger than small cities, appeared suddenly over major cities worldwide. New York, Tokyo, London, Mumbai, and dozens more. They cast enormous shadows that turned day into an eerie twilight. No one knew what to make of them at first. People stopped in the streets, staring up with a mix of wonder and fear. Cars crashed as drivers lost focus. Phone networks crashed within minutes as everyone tried to call loved ones or post videos online. The silence lasted nearly 6 hours. Then every screen on Earth, from smartphones to billboards, showed the same face. A tall, grey-skinned being, with deep-set glowing eyes and what looked like metal plates embedded in its skull. This was Admiral Krell-Thax of the Vuldari Dominion. "People of Earth," the alien spoke in perfect English, its voice deep and cold. "Your planet is now under the protection of the Vuldari Dominion. Your resources, your labor, and your world now belong to us. Surrender within 72 hours, or face extinction. This is not a negotiation." Panic spread like wildfire. In the United Nations emergency session, representatives shouted over each other. Some wanted to fight, others to surrender. The American president refused to bow to alien tyrants. The Chinese premier called for calm and strategic thinking. The Russian president simply ordered his nuclear forces to prepare. Meanwhile, Dr. Han Jian worked late in her small lab at the Korean Advanced Physics Institute. She was small in height, but giant in intellect, with short black hair always messy, from running her hands through it when thinking deeply. She hadn't slept since the aliens arrived. "Look at this energy reading," she told her assistant as she pointed at her computer screen. "When our jets fired missiles at the Hong Kong ship this morning, the shield flickered at this exact frequency." The world's military forces had already tried conventional attacks. Fighter jets had fired missiles. Tanks had launched shells. Even a desperate submarine captain had fired nuclear missiles at the ship over San Francisco. Nothing worked. The missiles either exploded harmlessly against invisible shields, or worse, were caught in strange beams of light and turned back against Earth targets. Dr. Han wasn't watching the news like everyone else. She was studying data, hunting for patterns. Her small lab, filled with humming machines and glowing screens, became the most important room on Earth, though no one knew it yet. "There's something odd about these readings," she mumbled, more to herself than anyone else. She pushed her glasses up and leaned closer to the screen. "The shield doesn't block the attack. It absorbs the energy and redirects it. But for a split second during the energy transfer, there's a weakness." Outside her lab, the world fell deeper into chaos. Food shortages began as people hoarded supplies. The countdown timer to the Vuldari deadline appeared on every digital device, impossible to remove. Military bases worldwide became staging grounds for what many believed would be humanity's last stand. In Seoul, 20 kilometers from Dr. Han's lab, the Vuldari made their first ground appearance. A shuttle landed in the center of Gwanghwamun Square. Soldiers wearing black armor that seemed to absorb light itself marched out. They moved with inhuman precision, scanning buildings with devices on their wrists. They took samples of the air, the ground, the water in the nearby fountain. They showed no interest in the humans watching fearfully from a distance. A brave reporter tried to approach them with a camera. Without hesitation, one soldier pointed a small device at him. The reporter froze mid-step, surrounded by a faint blue light, then collapsed when the light vanished. He was still breathing but couldn't move. Dr. Han saw the footage on a small screen in her lab. She frowned and worked faster. "They're analyzing our world," she said, "taking inventory of what they've claimed." The Vuldari warships remained perfectly still above the cities, but smaller craft now flew between them. Heavy clouds gathered around the larger ships, weather systems disturbed by their massive presence. Lightning sometimes flashed near their hulls, and each time, Dr. Han's instruments picked up unusual energy readings. "That's it," she suddenly shouted, jumping up from her chair. "It's not a continuous shield, it pulses at a specific frequency, and when lightning strikes near them..." Her discovery came just as the first Vuldari attack began. Without warning, a beam of intense red light shot down from the ship hovering over Cairo. A section of the city simply disappeared, replaced by a smoking crater. The message was clear: surrender, or this will happen everywhere. World leaders watched in horror. Military commanders prepared for what seemed like a hopeless battle. But in her small lab, Dr. Han Ji-un found the first glimmer of hope, a potential weakness in the seemingly invincible invaders. As lightning from a gathering storm flashed outside her window, she grabbed her phone to call the Defense Ministry. The Vuldari thought Earth would kneel in fear. They never expected that humans would find a way to fight back. The world changed in just 7 days. After Earth's governments refused to surrender, the Vuldari unleashed destruction that made even the worst human wars look like playground scuffles. Major cities burned. Tokyo disappeared in a flash of red light. London crumbled as unseen forces pulled buildings into the ground. New York flooded when something from the alien ships melted. The polar ice caps at impossible speed. People ran. They grabbed what they could carry and fled into mountains, forests, and deserts, anywhere away from cities. The lucky ones found military groups that had prepared emergency shelters. The unlucky ones faced the Vuldari ground troops that now patrolled the ruins, rounding up humans for work camps. Captain Kim Tae-ho led one of these military groups. He was a stocky man with a face that rarely smiled these days, but his eyes burned with determination. Once a special forces commander, he now led a ragtag band of soldiers and civilians, hiding in an abandoned mining complex deep in the mountains. "We need more than just guns," he told his exhausted team during their nightly meeting. "We need to understand what we're fighting." Someone in the back shouted, "How do you fight gods?" "They're not gods," came a quiet voice from the corner. Dr. Han Ji-un stepped forward. Her clothes were dirty, her face thin from too little food, but her mind was sharp as ever. "They're just advanced, and everything advanced has a weak point." Captain Kim had rescued Dr. Han when Seoul fell. He'd heard rumors about her research and sent a team to find her before the Vuldari could. Now she worked in a makeshift lab they'd set up in what was once the mine's office. "What good is finding a weak point when most of our weapons are gone?" asked a former Air Force pilot who'd ejected just before her jet was vaporized. "That's why we need to gather more people, Captain," Kim said. "Not just fighters. We need thinkers, builders, anyone who can help us understand and use what we've learned." That night, Captain Kim made the most important decision since the invasion. Using emergency radio frequencies and old-fashioned Morse code, he sent messages to other surviving military groups. He called his plan the FireForge Initiative. Its mission was simple but nearly impossible. Gather the brightest minds left on Earth, find the Vuldari weakness, and take back their planet. Within weeks, people began arriving at the mining complex. Scientists who escaped university bombings, engineers who once built satellites, soldiers from a dozen countries who no longer cared about old borders or conflicts. Dr. Han led the research team. She explained her discovery about the Vuldari shields. "They pulse at a specific frequency," she told the room of tired but hopeful faces. "When lightning struck near their ships, I noticed disruptions in their shield pattern. I think certain electromagnetic frequencies might interfere with their technology." A small hope, but hope nonetheless. The problem was testing her theory. They needed Vuldari technology to study. That opportunity came unexpectedly. A young woman arrived at the base with incredible news. A Vuldari scout ship had crashed in the forest about 50 miles away. Captain Kim immediately organized a mission to recover what they could. The team moved at night, avoiding Vuldari patrols that now used flying drones to spot human groups. They reached the crash site just before dawn. The scout ship was relatively small, about the size of a bus, and had hit the ground hard enough to crack open like an egg. 2 Vuldari bodies lay nearby, their grey skin already turning black in death. "Don't touch them," warned Dr. Han as she carefully examined the wreckage. "We don't know anything about their biology." The team worked quickly, salvaging strange metal components, devices with no obvious purpose and what looked like weapons. They loaded everything onto trucks and disappeared back into the mountains, just as a larger Vuldari ship appeared overhead, searching for its lost scouts. In the weeks that followed, more groups joined the FireForge initiative. They brought stories of Vuldari activities across the planet. The aliens were drilling deep into the Earth, extracting metals unknown to human science. They were building massive structures that seemed to suck moisture from the atmosphere. They were cataloging plant and animal species, taking samples and destroying the rest. "They're not just conquering us," Dr. Han said during one meeting. "They're harvesting our planet." The breakthrough came when Dr. Han and her team managed to power up one of the salvaged Vuldari devices. It projected holographic images that the team eventually recognized as maps of mineral deposits. More importantly, they discovered how the device powered itself through a crystalline structure that resonated at specific frequencies. "This is it," Dr. Han said, her voice trembling with excitement. "Their entire technology revolves around harmonic resonance. Their shields, their weapons, maybe even their communication systems." Captain Kim leaned over the strange device. "Can we disrupt it?" "Better," replied Dr. Han, with the first smile anyone had seen on her face since the invasion. "I think we can turn it against them." Meanwhile, the Vuldari continued their systematic exploitation of Earth. They built processing plants that belched strange blue smoke into the air. They redirected rivers to cool their massive machines. They remained completely unaware that in hidden bases worldwide, connected through Captain Kim's growing network, humans were beginning to understand their technology. The Vuldari had expected humans to surrender or die. They never considered a third option, that humans would adapt. That this seemingly primitive species would study, learn and prepare to fight back. In his private quarters, Captain Kim studied a map showing reported Vuldari activities. Their pattern was becoming clear. They were most interested in areas rich in certain rare minerals. This knowledge would be useful for what he was planning next. "They tried to force us to kneel," he told Dr. Han when she brought her latest findings. "But they don't understand humans very well, do they?" Dr. Han shook her head, holding up a modified device that pulsed with the same eerie blue light as Vuldari technology. "No," she said quietly, "but we're beginning to understand them." The secret of the Phoenix Protocol began with an accident. 2 weeks after they started studying the salvaged Vuldari technology, one of the resistance engineers dropped a device that burst open, releasing a strange gas. Everyone panicked, fearing poison. But after a few minutes of coughing, they realized something unusual. The Vuldari guard they had captured was writhing on the floor in agony, while the humans felt only mild discomfort. Dr. Han ordered everyone out and sealed the room, watching through a window as the Vuldari's grey skin blistered and peeled. She put on a protective suit and took air samples, analyzing them through the night. "It's our atmosphere," she announced the next morning to Captain Kim and the other leaders gathered in their underground command center. "When ionized by the energy released from their broken device, something in our air becomes toxic to them. That's why they wear those sealed suits when they walk around outside their ships." The command center buzzed with excitement. It was their first real advantage, a biological weakness they could exploit. "But how?" "They're not invincible after all," whispered Captain Kim, looking at the data on Dr. Han's tablet. "They can be hurt." Lieutenant Park Sun-mi stood up from her seat at the back of the room. She was younger than most resistance leaders, barely 30, with a quiet intensity that made people listen when she spoke. "If we can reproduce this effect," she said, "we could make weapons that don't just disable their shields, but attack the Vuldari themselves." Dr. Han nodded slowly. "We need to build devices that generate the same ionization effect, but controlled and focused, like electromagnetic pulse generators, but tuned to specific frequencies." They worked day and night for weeks, combining salvaged Vuldari technology with human electronics. The result was an awkward, heavy device about the size of a backpack that Dr. Han dubbed the Phoenix device, because from the ashes of Earth's defeat, they would rise again. Testing it was the next challenge. Lieutenant Park volunteered to lead a small team to strike a nearby Vuldari outpost, a risky mission that could reveal their new weapon to the enemy if it failed. "We need to know if it works in field conditions," Lieutenant Park argued when Captain Kim hesitated to approve the mission, "and we need to show people that fighting back is possible." The night of the mission, 8 resistance fighters moved silently through the forest toward the small Vuldari outpost that monitored a mineral extraction site. Lieutenant Park carried the prototype Phoenix device on her back, its weight making her steps careful and deliberate. "Remember," she whispered to her team as they took positions around the clearing, We need to get within 50 meters for maximum effect. Target their breathing equipment first if possible. The outpost was small, just 4 Vuldari guards and some automated equipment. Lieutenant Park activated the device, which began to hum quietly as it charged. The air around them seemed to thicken, taking on a faint blue glow that was almost invisible unless you looked directly at it. The effect was immediate and shocking. The Vuldari guards began to stagger, clawing at their breathing masks. Their movements became erratic as they desperately tried to seal leaks in their environmental suits. Within minutes, all 4 guards collapsed. "It works," breathed Lieutenant Park into her radio. "The Phoenix works." Her team quickly gathered samples of Vuldari technology from the outpost, downloaded data from their computers, and planted explosives. As they retreated into the forest, the outpost erupted into flames behind them, a beacon of resistance visible for miles. Word of their success spread rapidly through the underground network. For the first time since the invasion, humans had successfully fought back. Small victories led to larger ones, as more Phoenix devices were built and distributed to resistance cells worldwide. Aboard his command ship, Admiral Krelthax received the reports with growing alarm. He had assumed Earth would be like the dozen other worlds the Vuldari had conquered. Initial resistance followed by acceptance of their fate. But these humans were different. They were adapting, learning, using Vuldari technology against them. "Increase security at all harvesting sites," he ordered his commanders, "and begin a new protocol of extreme response to any human resistance. Burn entire regions if necessary. They need to understand the cost of defiance." The Vuldari response was swift and terrible. Whole towns were vaporized when resistance activity was detected nearby. Work camps doubled their production quotas, working human prisoners to death. Vuldari patrols increased, using new sensors to detect human gatherings, but they had miscalculated. Instead of crushing the human spirit, the brutality fueled it. For every town destroyed, 2 resistance cells formed. For every person worked to death in the camps, 5 more joined the fight. Her underground lab, Dr. Han worked to improve the Phoenix device, making it smaller and more powerful. "They're scared," she told Captain Kim. "For the first time, they know they're vulnerable. The resistance wasn't winning yet, far from it. But something fundamental had changed. The Vuldari had come to Earth expecting humans to kneel before their superior technology and power. Instead, humans had done what they did best: adapt, improvise, and fight back with unexpected ferocity. "Admiral Krelthax doesn't understand humans very well," Lieutenant Park said, after returning from another successful mission, her face smudged with dirt, but her eyes bright with determination. "When you try to force humans to kneel, we don't just refuse. We find a way to burn you down instead." The day that changed everything began with a simple radio broadcast. Captain Kim's voice, crackling through static on hidden frequencies, reached resistance cells worldwide with a message of hope. "This is Fireforge Command," he said. "Today, we share the fire." What followed was the complete technical specifications for the Phoenix device: how to build it, how to power it, how to use it against the Vuldari. The broadcast lasted only 7 minutes before the Vuldari could trace and jam it, but it was enough. The plans spread like wildfire through underground networks. In basements and abandoned factories around the world, people began building their own versions of the weapon using the parts they had available. Old microwave ovens provided the magnetrons. Car batteries supplied power. Salvaged alien technology served as amplifiers. They weren't as elegant as Dr. Han's original design, but they worked. A mechanic in Brazil built one inside an old boombox. A high school physics teacher in Kenya created a version powered by solar cells. In Australia, former miners constructed industrial-sized units mounted on the backs of pickup trucks. "They're not professional soldiers," Captain Kim told his lieutenants as reports filtered in. "They're just ordinary people who refuse to be slaves." The first coordinated attack came 3 weeks after the broadcast. At precisely noon local time, resistance cells hit Vuldari installations on every continent. The attacks weren't sophisticated, mostly hit-and-run operations, but the effect was devastating. Vuldari soldiers collapsed as their environmental suits failed. Their shields flickered and died under the electromagnetic assault. In the Vuldari command ship, Hovering over what was once Beijing, Admiral Krelthax watched in growing horror as red alert indicators spread across the global holographic display. How are they doing this? He demanded of his science officer. How did they develop countermeasures so quickly? The science officer, its grey face expressionless behind its breathing mask, had no answer. The Vuldari had conquered 17 worlds before Earth, and none had offered such fierce resistance after the initial conquest phase. Find the source, Krelthax ordered. Find whoever created this weapon. Eliminate them. On the ground, the resistance celebrated each small victory, but the war was far from won. The Vuldari still held overwhelming technological superiority. They controlled orbital weapons that could vaporize entire regions. For every outpost the humans destroyed, the Vuldari obliterated a town in retaliation, but humans kept fighting. Week by week the resistance grew stronger. Makeshift factories churned out Phoenix devices by the hundreds. Abandoned military bases became training grounds for fighters. People learned to communicate using old technologies the Vuldari couldn't easily monitor. Ham radios printed messages, even signal fires in remote areas. The Vuldari became increasingly desperate. Using captured humans as informants, they finally located the main research facility, where Dr. Han and her team continued to improve the Phoenix technology. The hidden base, built inside an old mine complex, was home to over 300 resistance, fighters and scientists. Captain Kim received the warning just minutes before the attack began. "They're coming," reported a breathless scout. "At least 30 shuttles and some kind of new ground vehicle we haven't seen before." Alarm sirens wailed throughout the base. People grabbed weapons and ran to defense positions, but everyone knew they couldn't withstand a full-scale Vuldari assault. "Get the research data," Captain Kim ordered Dr. Han. "That's the priority. Everything we've learned about their technology, their biology, the Phoenix improvements, it has to survive even if we don't." Dr. Han nodded grimly and rushed to the lab with her assistants. They began downloading everything onto portable drives while wiping the main computers. Outside, the first explosions rattled the mountain as Vuldari forces breached the outer defenses. Captain Kim organized a desperate defense, hoping to buy enough time for the evacuation of key personnel through the mine's emergency tunnels. Fighters with Phoenix devices took positions at choke points, while others prepared explosive traps along the main corridors. The battle was chaos. Dark tunnels lit by weapons fire, the screams of the wounded, the strange electronic wail of dying Vuldari. The humans fought with desperate courage, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. In the lab, Dr. Han finished the data transfer just as the first Vuldari troops broke through the inner defenses. She handed the drives to her youngest assistant. "Take these to the backup site," she said calmly. "Find Captain Kim if he survives. If not, find whoever's still fighting." "What about you?" the assistant asked, eyes wide with fear. Dr. Han picked up a modified Phoenix device, its core glowing with unstable energy. "I'm going to make sure they don't follow you." As the last evacuees fled through the escape tunnels, Dr. Han waited in the lab. When a squad of Vuldari elite troops burst through the door, she smiled sadly. "You wanted to find who created your nightmare," she said, though they couldn't understand her words. "Well, here I am." She triggered the overloaded device. The explosion collapsed that entire section of the mine, killing Dr. Han and dozens of Vuldari soldiers. The mountain itself seemed to shudder with grief. 3 days later, at a secondary base hundreds of miles away, Captain Kim, wounded but alive, received the data drives and the news of Dr. Han's sacrifice. He mourned her privately that night, allowing himself a rare moment of grief. But in the morning he gathered the surviving leaders around a makeshift table with the data drives containing Dr. Han's final work. "She found something," he told them, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. "A way to turn their entire atmospheric processing system against them. A way to win this war once and for all." He unfolded a hand-drawn map of Vuldari installations worldwide. "We're calling it Operation Wildfire," he said, "and it begins now." As he explained the plan, faces around the table changed from despair to cautious hope. It was audacious, perhaps, impossible, but after everything they'd survived, impossible didn't seem to matter anymore. "The Vuldari think they've won by destroying our main base," Captain Kim said. "They think they've cut off the head of the resistance, but they don't understand. This was never about one leader or one base. This is humanity fighting for our home, and we're just getting started." Operation Wildfire began at midnight on a moonless night. Across the planet, resistance fighters moved like shadows toward their targets, the massive atmospheric processors the Vuldari had built to make Earth's air more compatible with their biology. These processors, towering structures of alien metal and crystal, had been established on every continent. They slowly altered Earth's atmosphere, making it drier, heavier with certain gases, and gradually more poisonous to humans. The Vuldari planned to terraform Earth over decades, not caring that its native inhabitants couldn't survive the change. Captain Kim coordinated the global assault from a makeshift command center buried deep in an old nuclear shelter. Maps covered the walls, marked with processor locations and strike team positions. Radio operators maintained constant contact with teams worldwide, using code words and frequency-hopping transmissions to avoid Vuldari detection. "Strike teams, report ready status from all positions," said a young radio operator, her face illuminated by the green glow of her equipment. Captain Kim nodded grimly. "Give the go signal." On 6 continents, teams of 20 to 30 fighters approached the atmospheric processors. Each team carried equipment built from Dr. Han's final designs, reprogramming devices that could hack into the alien technology and reverse its function. The strike team in the Rocky Mountains moved carefully through pine forests, carrying their equipment on stretchers. Leading them was Lee Min-ho, a quiet engineer who had once designed satellites before the invasion. Now he carried Dr. Han's legacy, the core programming that would turn the Vuldari's technology against them. "Security is lighter than expected," he whispered into his radio as they approached the massive processor. Its structure rose nearly 1,000 feet into the night sky, pulsing with eerie blue light. "Same pattern at all sites," came Captain Kim's response. "They've pulled forces to hunt down resistance leadership. Use the opening." The attack itself was quick and nearly silent. Phoenix devices disabled the few Vuldari guards before they could sound alarms. Technicians cut through security barriers using tools made from salvaged alien metal. Within minutes, strike teams worldwide reached the central control nodes of each processor. Lee Min-ho connected his equipment to the alien interface, his fingers moving with practiced precision despite the tension. Similar scenes played out at processors in the Andes, the Alps, the Himalayas, the Ethiopian highlands, and the Australian outback. "Uploading reprogramming sequence," Lee reported, watching as human code overrode alien programming. 20%, 40%. In his orbiting command ship, Admiral Krell Thax received the first warnings too late. Alert signals flashed across his control panels as processor after processor reported intrusions. "Seal all processors remotely," he ordered. "Cut connections." But the Vuldari had built their system to be interconnected, each processor linked to others in a global network. As the first few fell to human control, they spread the new programming to others. "Upload complete," Lee announced. "Processor is responding. Reconfiguring atmospheric output now." Around the world, the great machines shuddered. Their blue glow shifted to an angry red. Instead of pumping alien gases into the atmosphere, they began generating a specific electromagnetic frequency, the exact one that disrupted Vuldari biology. The effect was not immediate, but spread like ripples on a pond. Within hours, Vuldari soldiers on the ground began to weaken as their environmental suits failed to filter the changing air. Within a day, the electromagnetic field reached low orbit, where the main Vuldari fleet hovered. On his command ship, Admiral Krell Thax watched in horror as crew members collapsed around him. Emergency alarms blared throughout the vessel. "The humans have weaponized our own processors," reported his science officer, voice weak through his failing breathing apparatus. "The field disrupts our ship systems as well. Weapons are offline." Krell Thax growled in fury. "Begin orbital bombardment of all processor locations. Destroy them all." But the weapons wouldn't respond. Ships that tried to fire found their energy systems failing at the critical moment. The few vessels that managed to launch attacks saw their energy beams dissipate harmlessly in the charged atmosphere. In desperation, Krelthax ordered something no Vuldari admiral had done in 800 years. Retreat. This world is lost, he said, his breathing labored as the field penetrated even his protected command center. All ships disengage from orbit. Set course for the home system. One by one, the massive Vuldari ships broke from Earth orbit, their engines flaring against the night sky. Some didn't make it, their systems failing completely. These fell to Earth like meteors, crashing into oceans or unpopulated areas. In resistance, phases worldwide, humans watched the ships depart with a mixture of disbelief and cautious joy. After nearly 2 years of occupation, the invaders were leaving. The weeks that followed were chaotic but filled with hope. The resistance emerged from hiding to begin the enormous task of rebuilding. City by city, they reclaimed their world, helping survivors and dismantling Vuldari facilities. Not all alien technology was destroyed. Humans began studying and adapting what had been left behind. Power systems that could provide clean energy, medical devices that could heal previously untreatable conditions, communications equipment that could reach deep space. 3 months. After the Vuldari retreat, Captain Kim stood on a hilltop overlooking a valley where a new research center was being built. Beside him was Lee Min-ho, now leading a team of engineers working to understand alien propulsion technology. "Do you think they'll come back?" Lee asked, watching workers below install salvaged Vuldari power cores. Captain Kim's gaze drifted to the sky where new defense satellites, built with a mixture of human ingenuity and alien tech, now orbited. Similar defenses were being established around the globe, all nations working together for the first time in human history. "They might," he answered honestly, "or others might come. But they'll find a different Earth waiting for them." In the valley below, children played near a memorial to those lost in the invasion. Dr. Han's name was prominent among them, along with thousands of others. But nearby, new homes were being built, gardens were being planted, and people laughed as they worked together. "We know the universe is bigger and more dangerous than we imagined," Captain Kim continued. "But we also know something the Vuldari didn't understand until it was too late." "What's that?" asked Lee. Captain Kim smiled slightly, his weather-worn face momentarily softening. "That when they tried to force Earth to kneel, they learned what humans do instead. We fight back, we adapt, we survive." He turned to look at his friend. "And when necessary, we answer with fire." In the darkening sky above them, the first stars became visible, no longer just points of light, but possible destinations. Humanity had announced its presence to the galaxy not as subjects but as equals who refused to kneel. Whatever came next, they would face it standing.